皆様、こんにちは。タスカルリソーセスのヤシロと申します。本日は私どものエチオピアでのパートナー、モラ様にお越しいただき、現地のリアルなお話をお伺いしていきたいと思います。では、まずはじめに、外務省海外安全ホームページより、エチオピアのページを参照させていただきまして、危険情報及び感染症危険情報を確認していきたいと思います。まずは、危険情報に関して一部国境地域、及び内陸部の一部地域においてレベル4、退避勧告がなされております。その他、広い地域におきまして、レベル3、渡航中止勧告、レベル2、不要不急の渡航中止、またレベル1、十分注意がなされております。感染症危険情報については特に発令とはなされていない状況でございます。はい、ありがとうございます。それでは、ここからは日本語から英語に切り替えさせていただきまして、エチオピアのパートナー、モル様にお話をお伺いしたいと思います。From now, I'd like to ask questions regarding Ethiopia's current situation and security to Mr. Mora. Mr. Mora, thank you for waiting.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Konnichiwa again. Yes, my name is Molla, the General Manager of Ambassa Travel, all the way from Addis. Yes, I'm really happy to join you today to explain the current situation of Ethiopia.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mora. So first of all, could you briefly introduce about your country?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So Ethiopia, well, if we are talking about as a travel destination, we say Ethiopia has a little bit of everything. In some cases, we have more of some of the things. And that's to say, Ethiopia is one of the best destinations because of the combination of very old history, very vibrant and colorful culture, food, and overall also relatively in terms of peace and security. So we have from safari to very old cultures and history, as I said earlier. So Ethiopia is called the land of origins. The motto is the land of origins because Ethiopia is the origin of coffee. If we believe in archaeology, Ethiopia, the first, or I would say the complete human skeleton is from Ethiopia. We believe, including yourself, is from Ethiopia original. And if we look at also Christianity, again, Ethiopia is one of the first country to accept Christianity. So that is what makes Ethiopia a very, how do you say, a prominent destination in the Horn of Africa.
Okay, thank you for introducing. So now I would like to proceed the question. So first question is regarding the PT climbs for the travelers or the visitors. So like, have there been any PT climbs targeting foreigner visiting Ethiopia in recent years happen? Because the Japanese Ministry of the Foreign Affairs reported that the Japanese people have been victims of the theft and home invasion in Ethiopia. So I would appreciate if you can share the current situation. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. So if we look at Addis Ababa mainly, the capital city of Ethiopia, as it's the case is similar to any global capital city. The last few years, I think crime has been increased. Pickpocketing is the maximum I would assume can be prevalent, especially in most crowded places, in touristic areas. However, things are relative, right? So, however, if we look at, for example, active violence or active crimes, Ethiopia remains one of the safest country. As I said earlier, after COVID, because of global economic situations, and also the conflict we have had in the north, that has an effect, obviously, but not as such that, for example, if you go to Piazza or old city, old town, old part of the town, you will see, how to say, real golds and diamonds being sold in the shops, not fake ones. And I think it's a testament to show the level of crime, really. So pickpocketing, as I said, especially in the crowded areas, it happens. And it has been reported that there is a slight increment on that. When it comes to bulk burglary or break into houses, there were some reports, mainly, especially a year ago, where because of the current situation we have had in the north, there were some reports in the overall. But even though I don't have really the fact, if I make my own personal judgment from what I have seen, from what I observe every day, I think street lights are being introduced across the city, and CCTV cameras, smart cameras are introduced across the city following these reports. And even in our private houses, we are requested to put up lights and to put up cameras as well, just to protect that. So, these measures are being taken. And especially I just want to highlight one thing is that this is going through an amazing transformation in terms of the streets of Addis, the roads have been expanded, walkways, bicycle lanes have been also introduced lately, and about 45-kilometer distance have been revamped in the last 3 months, making it possible for people to walk safely and soundly.
I see. Thank you for sharing. So, for the second question is regarding the safe transportation. It's in Ethiopia. Is there any a safe transportation that the traveler or the visitor can arrange by themselves, like a Uber? Is it developed well in Ethiopia?
Yes. Surprisingly, there are. Just last week, I was just checking the news as we are also in the transport sector ourselves as a company. So there are about 15 ride-hailing companies, kind of Uber, which are local, and there are, I think, 2 companies which are multinationals operating in other countries. Therefore, it's possible to have service like Uber. And in terms of safety, again, I think countries or organizations take measures when some incidents happen. That's obvious. The good thing is that they have taken steps. So recently, there is even one company named after safety, which focuses on safety transportation. That is to say, they have the mechanisms which they track or they follow. And so just to summarize it, we have several of them. And very recently, following the previous, in our previous conversation, we have said that the slight increase of crimes. So following that, I think safety measures have been introduced by many of the companies I know so far. Therefore, there are many options, very convenient, and also they are becoming more safer. I would say, looking at the measures they have taken and also the announcements they have made for the last months. And now everyone says safety is the priority. And by the way, the understanding about health and safety in Ethiopia is really increasing, I would say, in terms of health and safety requirements as well. Yeah.
I see. Thank you so much. So for the third question is regarding the rules and regulation in Ethiopia. So are there any that traveler or the visitor need to be careful not to be involved in any trouble in Ethiopia, such as any restriction on smoking or drinking or taking picture at the restricted areas, such as, something like that.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, first of all, I think it's very important to highlight. Well, for example, in Ethiopia, for Ethiopians, for 98% of the Ethiopians, religion is important. So with that, I can tell you it's a very highly cultured society and also relatively conservative, I would say. Therefore, with that, any display of, for example, LGBTQ in public is not as such. So it's always important to note that. The second one is when it comes to, as I said, photographing in restricted areas. Yes, there are government establishments, embassies. There are areas. And the good thing, I mean, if anyone is traveling with our company, for example, our guides, our drivers are well informed, well aware about this. So there are special places where you are not allowed to take photos. In most cases, there are signboards saying no photography, which makes life easier. And another one is in terms of smoking. Again, in Ethiopia, very few people smoke. And since 3 years nearly, they are only smoking in public is prohibited or forbidden. Therefore, in most places, in most establishments, such as restaurants, hotels, they are dedicated spaces. Therefore, people can smoke. And of course, as everywhere in the world, drug or that kind is strictly forbidden, including shisha, which can be common in some countries. Therefore, those are restricted somehow. Those are the things travelers should be aware of in general.
I see. Since some of the Japanese people really like to smoke or drinking alcohol, so it's not so there is any freedom on Ethiopia or need to be careful a bit.
In terms of drinking, I think, it's anyone can drink anywhere at any situation, apart from, of course, public parts, public, this public infrastructures, I would say. So that's not an issue as well. In fact, I want to highlight that Ethiopia is now becoming, or mainly Addis Ababa is becoming a city break destinations where people would like to come for nightlife. And so with that, I think you can assume there is really, I would say, there's no issue about drinking. In terms of smoking, I think it's just finding the right place. Otherwise, there's no problem at all. But in the public transport or on the street and so forth, it's forbidden. And that's, of course, for obvious reason. As I said, a very small portion of the population smokes in Ethiopia.
I see. Thank you so much for sharing. So for the first question is regarding the payment method after the traveler or visitor come into Ethiopia. Is the card payment or the mobile payment easy to use or develop in Ethiopia compared to other countries, especially in Africa?
Yes, I would say Ethiopia is coping up with, for example, our neighbors like Kenya or South Africa. What I mean is that mobile banking, the last 3 years have been an amazing expansion. I think just over a year, some of our national telecom company, which is also into mobile payments, they say they have over 10 millions of people just in 1 year subscription. So it can tell you the level of expansion or penetration in that case. So for local, of course, there are some requirements in terms of opening local bank accounts for tourists. Obviously, I think it's not possible even. However, if you look at expats or Japanese living in Ethiopia, it's possible. So mobile banking is now, it's slowly, cash is not the favored method of payment anymore. And if you look at the international cards, I think major cards such as MasterCard, Visa, or American Express, and even Union, they are being used here. It is, of course, one of the preferred ways as well. If you ask us about our company, for example, card is the best way. And of course, and another one is the usual SWIFT transfer, which we use. So, but going back to your question, I think there are multiple players nowadays. There are about 5 players again or more. So where this electronic payment is become really prevalent in most cases, and its payment has become more easier for travelers.
Thank you for sharing. Okay, so the next question is regarding about the medical environment and situations in Ethiopia. So are there any disease or infections that currently prevalent in Ethiopia that the traveler or the visitor should be aware of?
Not to my knowledge. Of course, Ethiopia, even though Ethiopia can be considered in general a highland country where high altitude. However, there are also some parts of the country for example, if we look at the Omo Valley, which is one of the main tourist destinations. If we look to the northeast, and some lowlands, malaria is something that one needs to be careful about. I think that would be one of, I would say, the major diseases where we have to be aware. Anything else, to be frank, I am not aware. However, of course, it's very important that I have to consult with health professionals But as a travel company, that's one of the areas. If we look at yellow fever, for example, the Ethiopian health authorities want to make sure that if a traveler comes from a yellow fever, not country, but from a country where there's a yellow fever, they want to know, or they ask for vaccination. Otherwise, malaria is, I think, the major ones which we really make sure that our clients are aware of.
Thank you so much. So, one of the question is like, how does the level of the medical care in Ethiopia compare to other African countries?
Well, I mean, in most cases, my reference will mostly be Kenyan. So the reason is because as a travel company, as a transport company, I would say they are really great reference for us. And in terms of tourism, it's a country that we look at up. Therefore, Ethiopia, well, I would say in my knowledge, and for those who can afford, if we look at the expats or tourists or travelers, I think in major cities, regional cities, or capital city, there's a good medical facilities. And if you look at that, is including medical ambulances, for example, air ambulance could be one considered. Therefore, it is relatively okay. But comparing, as I said, to our southernmost neighbor, Kenya, I would say we have some work to do comparing to Kenya. However, I think the last 10 years, I would say, there is a great improvement. And they are now, the sector has become also very competitive. Therefore, I would say there are great facilities in major cities. But if we look at least the capital city, I believe there are really great facilities, as far as I understand.
I see. Thank you so much. So next, I'd like to pass the mic to our crisis management consultant, Kawashita-san. Is there any question from your side, Kawashita-san?
Hi, Molla-san. And I'd like to ask you some questions from the standing point of business. Now, Ethiopia is keeping about 6% economic growth in recent years. It means Ethiopia is one of the attractive country in Africa. Also, Ethiopia has over 100 million populations, and it consists of working at a large scale of working age and the following young generations. From the standing point of demographics, also attractive. It's also good, and Ethiopia have a good potential for business, I understand. However, Ethiopia also have problem about race and religious troubles, as the same as other African countries. Races mean that many races in Ethiopia, the Oboro people, the Amhara people, and the Somali people, the Tigray people, like that. And and also the religious problem of the Muslim and the Christians, I understand. And so I have two questions about these problems. Question number one is, after Tigray conflict, the Tigray conflict was over in 2022 by African Union mediation. How about current security situations after the Tigray conflict? And the second question is about Muslim and Christian issues in southern part of Ethiopia, especially in Oromia region. And I understand there are some frictions exist between the large Muslim community and Christians who is moving into the area from the north. What do you think of this issue? I hope so, and I'd like to ask you the two questions.
Okay. Well, thank you for the questions. And first of all, I want our viewers to understand that I am not a political analyst or an economist.
Yes.
So I am a tourism professional and I'm an ordinary citizen with a basic understanding of the situation. It's very important to clear. Having said that, yes, you have highlighted very important points in terms of economy. I want to highlight that as well. Yes, Ethiopia has one of the fastest economy. We have over 120 million people. In terms of whether, as I always say, as I had a chance to go for travel and living in Europe, Ethiopia has a heavenly weather, I would say, and a very pleasant weather, and a great resource in terms of agricultural resource and everything. So I would say that's when I would say we have a little bit of everything. In some cases, more of things. So it's true. When it comes to different, also how diverse Ethiopia is, as a tourism professional, I look at that as an asset, where there are different religious festivals. There are different ethnic groups. We have over 80 different tribes. That is one is different from another, complete in terms of lifestyle, the way we dress, our language and everything. Obviously, that I see it as a great asset for the country and great asset specific to the tourism industry. And so that's one to highlight. So if we look at also in terms of security, from my understanding, yes, it is a great progress, I would say, for the fact that the conflict in Tigray region on the northern part of Ethiopia has been resolved in a peace deal, which brought, a great deal of relief for our country and for the people of Ethiopia. And then the effect of that conflict, again, can be now witnessed in Amhara region as well, which is also one of the major destinations where there are the few of the major tourist destinations that are available. So that effect still is being felt. And unfortunately, it has been going for the last nearly 1 year. We hope that things, and what we hear from all sides is that there is, we are optimistic that this will be resolved. And so we can enjoy the freedom of traveling across the country for long, how do you say, for example, if we look at, the typical Northern program, we travel for 20 days across the country from the central all the way to the north. We are really, we miss that and we are looking forward to that. And so I hope that will be resolved, and I'm personally very optimistic that will be resolved. Of course, the effect to the economy, and especially for the people in that area, is huge. Even the effect can be felt across the country, including the capital city. That's And when it comes to, again, religious or Christian Muslim, I would have a contrasting response to that. From the place where I was born and where I studied, the city is called Desi, which can be taken as an example of religious coexistence, in which my mother could be a Christian and my father could be a Muslim. And any Ethiopian can tell you that level of coexistence is really great. For the areas you have mentioned, which I don't have a specific information with, I think in most cases, when there are communal conflicts between communities, it could be about resources. If we look at, for example, the lowland border, for example, if we look at the northeast and the southeast, if we look at that area, which is the lowland, where people are, in some part of the population is nomad, and there is resource conflict, I would say conflict because of grazing lands and water. That can happen also cross country, for example, between the nomads from Kenya with the Ethiopian part of the community. So it's very hard for me, knowing and having experience in life, the level of religious coexistence in Ethiopia. As far as I understand, even from my brothers and sisters, my uncles, where I came from, I think it's very hard for me to say those conflicts can happen because of religious differences. I would say they may have other aspects which I don't have the understanding, but as I said, I would have another stand, or opposite stand to this. By the way, to take you back to history, old history, Ethiopia is the first country in the world where these three major religions came together. That's to say, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim came together, and thousands of years ago. And that coexistence still lives on, and that can be reflected, for example, when we celebrate our national or religious holidays, in which, for example, during Christian festival, it could be Ethiopian Christmas or Epiphany, you would see some of our Muslim brothers and sisters joining and celebrating it. And also when we build churches, we know we have some stories where some Muslims are contributing for the building of this church, and they are really great examples that they have been in the press as well. We have that. And also, for example, very recently this year, when the Christianity celebration was happening, the Muslims came out and cleaned the streets in Addis Ababa. So I think I would say the information you may have could be very minor comparing to the religious coexistence we have.
Okay, thank you so much. I understand well. Thank you.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very
By
much.
the way, sorry, I think I
sorry,
forgot.
sorry.
May I go back to in terms of business? Because as a businessman, as you said, we have talked about the population size, and I forgot to mention the age. That is to say, that more than 50% of the population is from 15 to 35%. So it's a working age. And also, as I said, the industrial strategic plans. And I think as we are talking about business, I want to highlight as well, Ethiopia has introduced floating currency as of last week. Obviously, that is mainly targeting the foreign direct investment. So Ethiopia has become much open than ever before. And nearly all the sectors now are open for international investors.
Thank you for sharing, Mr. Morat. So lastly, could you give some message to the audience for going to Ethiopia for the traveling or business purposes?
Thank you. I hope I'm not biased, but what I want to say is that Ethiopia is a beautiful country. It's a beautiful country, as we have talked about all the culture, the weather, the landscape, nature. And Ethiopia is a hidden treasure, I would say. And that's exactly what our customers are saying. We understand there are certain perceptions about Ethiopia in terms of poverty or about the security, the conflicts we have had, and also some which we have discussed about. But the experience one can get after visiting the country is uncomparable to what you are hearing. Second, in terms of investment, in terms of business, I consider myself, despite all the challenges, one of the luckiest generation in which we have the means to work with all the, even though there are certain bureaucracies, that's we consider as part of that's part of the progress. And at the same time, that's why there are advantages. That's why there are opportunities here, because not everyone can make it. So Ethiopia is it's an open new opportunity for the global travelers, for the global business people. More than 99.99% of the economy is owned purely by Ethiopians. So it can tell you the level of opportunity we have. About natural resources and everything, I think we don't have time to talk about it, but there's so much opportunity for travels, for business. And we shouldn't forget as well that Addis Ababa is called the capital city of Africa because of the African Union, the United Nations, Economic Commission, and many international organizations, embassies. So some call it Addis is a gateway to Africa. And thanks to our airlines, which is also connecting Africa to the globe. Therefore, in many aspects, from an ordinary person, from an ordinary tourism professional, I think Ethiopia is really a great destination for leisure or business.
Okay, thank you so much. So we learned a lot from the Mr. Mora today. Thank you for sharing, Mr. Mora. That's all for the video. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you so much. And I hope we will have more conversation, and thank you for the great questions. Thank you very much for the opportunity as well.
Okay,
Thank you
thank
very
you.
much.